It cannot land there. Negative. Ember, wave off! The tower's voice snapped in her headset, sharp over the growl of the engines. Captain Elena Markova kept her eyes pinned to the broken stretch of highway that someone had dared to mark as a strip. Chunks of asphalt, a burned-out truck at the far end, heat shimmering like a mirage. Her A-10C shuddered in the hot crosswind. Ember, this is Ghost. You try to put that thing down there and we are bagging you in pieces. Climb now. Convoy hammer is black on ammo, another voice cut in, tighter, closer to panic. We are pinned and we are out of time. If she does not land, we do not move. Elena flexed her gloved fingers on the stick, feeling the weight of fuel, the sluggish drag of the pods under her wings. She had already burned down most of her rounds. The jet was lighter than anyone up there knew. ROE is clear, the supervisor barked. No landings on unimproved surfaces without prior certification. Ember, acknowledge. Say intentions. Silence filled her cockpit, louder than the engines. The highway grew larger in the windscreen. Every instinct screamed two different answers at once. Captain, Ghost said quietly, all the anger gone. If you go in, no one can pull you out. Elena swallowed, jaw locking. Her thumb hovered over the mic switch. Ember, say intentions, the tower repeated. You are inside decision gate. Her lips moved before her mind caught up. Razor, Ember is... Static cracked. The recording cut. 36 hours earlier, Al-Sara Air Base, UTC-3. The bar at Al-Sara sounded like every other deployed bar Elena had known. Metal chairs scraping concrete. Someone laughing too loudly at a joke that was not funny. Glasses clinking under fluorescent lights that tried and failed to feel like home. She sat at the edge of it, near the wall where the noise dulled a little, nursing one warm drink and a stack of laminated performance charts on her lap. The numbers steadied her more than the alcohol. Distance required versus runway condition. Crosswind limits. Stopping margins. Columns and rows, clean and merciless. Ember. She looked up. Major David Ricks, call sign Ghost, threaded through the crowd toward her, a grin already in place. He had that easy command presence that made people lean in when he spoke, even when he was talking nonsense. You hiding with your homework again? He teased, glancing at the charts. We are off duty. You are allowed to pretend the brick flies itself. Around him, two lieutenants lifted their glasses. To the brick, one called. The one that can land on a postage stamp. Elena forced a smile. It is not a brick. Sure it is, the other lieutenant said. He was new, still sunburned, name tape reading Miller. Come on, ma'am. Every story I heard before I got here was about the Warthog just dropping out of the sky onto whatever patch of dirt it wanted. That thing could land on that pool table if you gave it a running start. Laughter rippled around them. Someone clapped Miller on the shoulder. Elena's fingers tightened on the plastic edge of her charts. She felt the old radio call slide in, uninvited. Calm, professional, the JTAC saying the helo was delayed, asking if there was any chance of... She shut it down. It cannot, she said, before she could stop herself. The group quieted a notch. Ghost's grin thinned. What was that, Ember? It cannot land on any patch of dirt, she said, hearing the flatness in her own voice. There are limits. Weight, surface, obstructions, crosswind. You all know this. Miller shrugged, undeterred. Sure, on paper. But you have seen the videos. Highway landings. Taxiways. I mean, I heard this one story where the pilots were yelling, "It cannot land there." And the hog just... Proved them wrong? Elena finished, eyes on him. He blinked, surprised she knew the line. The bar's noise seemed to slide further away. Somewhere beyond the thin walls, a Joe U-8 test burst thudded through the night like a slow heartbeat. She opened the top chart, the one she kept closest. Cratered runway, hot day, moderate crosswind, almost exactly like the one she had refused. Short, semi-prepared strip at this density altitude, she said, tapping the columns with her thumbnail. At typical combat weight, you do not have the stopping distance if your anti-skid fails. If the surface is contaminated, you lose more. If there is debris beyond the threshold, you accept that you may not keep it on the pavement. These are not stories. These are numbers. Miller shifted, discomfort replacing bravado. I just meant... I know what you meant, she said quietly. I have heard the same stories. Beside him, Ghost studied her, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper than usual. We also know the jet can take punishment, he said. That counts for something. Yes, Elena said. It means it can sometimes survive bad decisions. It does not mean we should plan on making them. The voice that cut across the suddenly awkward circle belonged to Lot Cole Harris. He stood near the doorway, arms folded, squadron patch bright on his flight suit. Good, he said, because we have a mission coming up that is going to test how much of this is legend and how much is math. Conversations around them dimmed further, attention tilting his way. Ember, Harris went on. Since you like numbers, you are lead on our forward strip study for Iron Gate. Briefing at O600Z. Bring those charts. He gave her a level look that was not quite a smile, then turned away. Around her, the bar noise swelled back, but the easy laughter did not quite return. Ghost exhaled, long and slow. Congratulations, he murmured. Sounds like you just volunteered to prove us all wrong. Elena looked down at the chart with the cratered runway and the narrow margin and felt her stomach knot. Maybe, she thought, that was exactly what she was afraid of. The briefing room had the sterile chill of a place where arguments outlived people. Captain Elena Markova slipped into a seat near the front, placing her charts neatly before her. At 0600Z sharp, the lights dimmed, and Lil T. Cole Harris stepped into the projector's wash like a man arriving on his own stage. Today, he began, we are clearing the air on what the A-10 can and cannot do during Iron Gate. The first slide clicked up. A publicity photo of a Warthog on a highway in some NATO exercise years ago. A few pilots murmured appreciatively. Elena felt her jaw tighten. We have gained a reputation, Harris continued, for flexibility in forward operations. Some of it earned, some of it aspirational. Across the aisle, Liltote Miller straightened, clearly expecting a fun lecture confirming his bar stories. It was not. Harris advanced the next slide. Runway requirements, semi-prepared surfaces, real numbers, real margins, nothing generous. Elena, he said, eyes cutting toward her, why don't you walk us through the braking performance constraints? She recognized the move instantly. Hand her the mic early, make her the face of the cautionary voice so the room would label her tone instead of the information. Still, she stood. The A-10C's landing gear is built for robustness, not miracles, she said, keeping her voice even. We can handle rough surfaces, but we cannot disregard distance or debris. A highway is not automatically a runway. If it is contaminated or obstructed, you cannot count on directional control on rollout. A captain in the back snorted. We all saw that clip from Germany. They made it look easy. And that strip, Elena said, was pre-surveyed, reinforced, cleaned, and guarded. It was not a random road. Harris let the silence breathe before stepping in. Our ROE for Iron Gate is explicit. No landings on uncertified surfaces. Engineers must sign off on any forward strip. No exceptions. The word exceptions hung in the air, almost daring someone to challenge it. Elena saw a few glances bounce between pilots, the way men look at one another when they want someone else to raise the forbidden question. She continued, "If we treat myths as doctrine, we create false confidence. False confidence kills crews." A ripple of discomfort ran through the room. Ghost met her eyes briefly. He did not disagree, but he also did not look ready to defend her. Harris clicked to the next slide, a satellite view of a narrow forward strip they were scheduled to test. And since Captain Markova feels strongly about this, she will be led for our pre-mission study and the on-site air assessment. There it was. The trap sprung politely. Elena kept her expression locked. "Copy," she said. Miller whispered something to his seatmate. Elena did not catch the words, but she caught the tone. Amusement, maybe disbelief that the woman who had rejected the myth was now expected to validate or disprove it in the field. Harris advanced one last slide. A junction. A highway curving through semi-desert terrain. Bright yellow annotations labeled it as potential FARP, contingency use. It was the same highway she had glimpsed in the Intel add-on last night. The same shape. The same uneasy length. "We will revisit this location if required," Harris said. "Dismissed." Chairs scraped. Brief chatter rose. But Elena sat still for a long heartbeat, staring at that highway on the screen. Something about it made her pulse tick faster. Not fear, exactly, but recognition. A premonition of being forced once again into the space between what was allowed and what was needed. Ghost lingered as the others filed out. "You all right?" he asked. "Yes," she said. But even she did not quite believe it. The simulator bay was kept colder than the rest of the building, as if the chill would keep tempers down. Captain Elena Markova zipped her flight suit higher and climbed the narrow steps into the mock cockpit. The familiar shape of the A-10's instrument panel rising around her in dim green. "All right, Ember," the instructor's voice crackled over the intercom. "Profile 3, single engine, partial flaps, crosswind, short strip. We will see if the numbers you love so much actually mean anything." Through the canopy shell, she could see the silhouettes of other pilots clustered behind the glass of the control room. Ghost's broad shoulders, Miller's restless fidgeting, an audience. "Scenario loaded," the instructor said. "Runway 31, semi-prepared, reduced length. You are heavy but legal. ROE remains standard. No unbriefed surfaces, no heroics. Just put it down." "Copy," Elena replied. The world outside her HUD resolved into a flat strip of pavement, dirt flatlands, a windsock leaning stubbornly right. Engine 1 instruments showed normal. Engine 2 had a lazy, simulated flicker. She felt her hands settle where they always did. Left on throttles, right on the stick, feet poised on the rudder pedals. She flew the approach by the book, nose steady, airspeed on target. The motion base hummed and tilted, mimicking subtle bumps of turbulence. It was almost convincing enough to give her stomach a slow roll. "Looking good," the instructor drawled. "See, kids? The brick can dance." From the control room, a low chuckle. She ignored it. Threshold. Flare. The wheels kissed the runway with a muted thump that the motion base turned into a satisfying settle. Then the sim threw the hook. A red KS message flashed. "Anti-skid fail." The jet lurched left as soon as she applied brakes. The motion platform jerked. The runway edge rushed toward the Houdini's peripheral symbology. "Brake failure," the instructor announced, suddenly alert. Correct. Elena's heart punched once, hard. It was not the calm, clinical warning tone she heard. It was another voice, older, bleeding through memory. We are not going to make it if... She snapped the rudder in, eased off the brakes, worked the throttles just enough to straighten the nose. The tires squealed in the sim's speakers, a startlingly intimate sound. Runway remaining ticked down in her mind without needing the HUD cue. Too fast. Too little pavement. She modulated pressure, trading stopping distance for control, coaxing the stubborn, heavy thing to stay centered. The runway end lights loomed, then slid under the nose. The motion base shuddered to a halt. Stopped, the instructor said, surprised. Barely, on centerline. Applause burst from the dark behind the glass. Miller's voice cut through. See? She could land that thing on that highway from the slide. Easy. Elena's breath fogged the inside of the mask slightly. Easy. Run it again with a tailwind and debris, someone suggested. Negative, the instructor said, recovering his swagger. We are not here to prove she is insane. Yet. Laughter, the tension broke. For them. For her, the echo of the almost loss still rang in her limbs. She unstrapped slowly, aware of the faint tremor in her fingers. When she stepped out of the sim, Ghost met her with a crooked grin. Nice save, he said. You just fed every bar story for the next month. Before she could answer, a runner from Ops appeared at the doorway, holding a folded sheet. Alert order just dropped, he said. Operation Iron Gate is a go. Step times in 30. Captain Markova, you are on the first frag. The laughter in the room dimmed at once. Elena felt the cold of the sim bay deepen, as if the hypothetical had just bled straight into the real world, and the margins that had seemed academic were about to pick a side. The ops room smelled of burned coffee and printer toner. Maps covered the walls. Arcs of artillery range, shaded threat rings, convoy routes drawn in precise, hopeful lines. Captain Elena Markova stood at the central table, helmet bag at her boots, tracing convoy hammer's route with one finger. Origin at checkpoint Alpha, the intel captain said, tapping a point on the map. Then west along Route Green to the forward strip here. His pen landed on a thin line of pavement labeled F-SARA 2. JTAC Viking embedded with the lead vehicles. Elena glanced at the time block at the top of the slide. Tight. No slack for surprises. What do we know about enemy artillery? She asked. Indirect fire from this sector. He circled a hazy area north of the route. Ranges estimated, not confirmed. Expect harassing fire. No confirmed armor. Estimated, she repeated. Not confirmed. Lilte Cole Harris stepped in. We do not have the luxury of waiting for perfect clarity. Hammer moves with or without us. With us, they have Cass. On the next slide, the details she cared about. A-10C loadout for Iron Gate. 2 AGM-65s, a pair of guided bombs, full 30mm external fuel tanks. Enough flexibility to hit hard and stay a while. She cataloged it automatically, matching weapons to the red circles on the map. ROE appeared in neat bullet points under the weapons list. No fires into the village grid unless declared troops in contact. Positive identification required for all targets outside declared engagement areas. And the forward strip? Elena asked. Engineer status? Certified as of last week, the intel officer said. Semi-prepared, marginal length, but acceptable. We will use it as a FARP and possible divert if Alsara goes black. She did not like marginal when it came to places she might have to land. She opened her mouth to press, But Harris's gaze cut across the table like a warning. "Your job," he said, "is CAS and Overwatch. Hammer's job is to get to the strip. The engineer's job is to keep it usable. Everyone stays in their lane." Ghost leaned on the table beside her, studying the route. "You will have good sight lines along this section," he said, pointing to the highway junction she recognized from the earlier slide. "If Viking needs you, that is where it will get ugly." The briefing rolled on. Call signs, frequencies, tanker tracks. The weight of details pushed down on the gaps until they almost looked like solid ground. They were about to break when an engineer in dusty overalls slipped in, a tablet tucked under his arm. He went straight to Harris, murmur too low for Elena to catch. Harris's jaw ticked once. "Update," he said, turning back to the room. "There are indications of possible tampering with fuel storage at the forward strip. No visual confirmation yet. We are sending a team, but until we know more, treat the strip as potentially compromised." Elena felt the air thin. "Is the mission scrubbed?" she asked. "No," Harris said. "Hammer still moves. We need presence on station. Until we have hard proof the strip is out of play, it stays in the plan." "Sir, if the strip is gone, then we will adapt," he cut in. "In the air, with real-time information, not from this table. You will launch as fragged." There it was again. The quiet, familiar shift from certainty to hope, wrapped in confident words. Outside, the sky had gone from gold to deepening blue. Artillery flashes stitched the horizon an uneven orange. The printers in the corner spat out the final frag orders with mechanical indifference. On the line, her jet waited, squat and ugly, loaded exactly as the slide had promised. Elena walked toward it beside Ghost, the air cooler now that the sun was falling. "Forward strip possibly compromised," Ghost muttered. "Love that phrase." "Better than definitely gone," she said, though she was not sure she believed it. They climbed in, strapped down, taxied to the runway. Clearance came quick, controllers talking faster than usual. As they climbed into the darkening sky, the border region ahead flickered like a bad connection. Minutes later, as they leveled into their assigned block, a burst of encrypted chatter broke through on the JTAC net. The decoded text scrolled across her data link display in clipped, urgent lines. "Viking. Strip status unknown. Possible hostile activity, vicinity, F-SARA 2, request eyes on." Elena glanced at the waypoint marker for the forward strip, a tiny symbol blinking in the smoky distance. The plan, she thought, was already starting to come apart. The world below her had turned the color of dried blood. From 15,000 feet, Capta? Elena Markova watched the desert dissolve into a smear of brown and copper, smoke strands curling up like fingers toward her A-10. "Ember, Ghost, check altitude in the stack," Ghost called. "I'm at Angels 1-6. "Ember Angels 1-5, she replied. "Fuel 9.2. She did the math automatically. Time on station was a shrinking number inscribed behind her eyes. Tanker track was a good flight away. Convoy Hammer was somewhere beneath the haze, pushing toward a strip that might already be a ghost. She slewed the targeting pod along Route Green, the grayscale image jittering over a ribbon of road. Headlights glowed as dull white smudges broken by pockets of smoke. "Viking Ember in the stack overhead, looking for you," she transmitted. "Say position relative to checkpoint Bravo." Static chewed a second out of the reply. "Ember Viking, we are 2 clicks short of Bravo. Visibility degraded. Taking sporadic IDF, no visual on launch point. Request eyes on the strip, over." Her crosshairs crept along the route. hunting for the heavy shapes of armored trucks, the boxy silhouettes of supply vehicles. For every vehicle that looked like theirs, another could have belonged to anyone. ROE sat in the corner of her mind like a stubborn weight, positive identification before engaging any suspected enemy vehicles. No exceptions. The village grid to the south flickered with small heat signatures. People moving, no doubt scared out of their homes by the distant thunder of artillery. "Ember, this is Tower," a controller's voice broke in. "Confirm visual on F-SARA 2. "Negative visual, still searching," Elena said. She nudged the nose a fraction, letting the pod pick up the forward strip waypoint. Slowly, the outline of F-SARA 2 slid into view, emerging from the smoke like a photograph developing. Her stomach tightened. The runway was a broken line of blackened craters and twisted metal. A row of fuel bladders along the edge burned with steady, vicious flames, heat shimmering so fiercely that the pod's image warped at the edges. Whatever it had been a week ago, it was no longer a strip. "Ember, report," Tower pressed. "I have F-SARA 2 in sight," she said. Her voice sounded distant in her own ears. "Runway is cratered along Central 3rd, multiple impact points. Fuel storage is on fire. I see no usable pavement. I say again, strip appears destroyed." Silence answered for a beat too long. Ghost cut in first. "Confirm no viable touchdown zone, Ember?" She measured with the crosshairs out of habit, counting rough distances between craters, imagining approach speeds, braking. "Negative," she said. "There is not enough continuous surface to land anything with wings." "Copy," Ghost said quietly. Tower came back in, tone clipped. "Ember, Ghost, maintain overwatch. Engineers are en route to verify. Until we receive their report, F-SARA 2 remains our designated FARP and divert." Elena stared at the burning wreckage in her display. "Sir, the strip is unusable now. Convoy hammer cannot—" "Ember," Tower interrupted. "We will not adjust the ground plan based on sensor imagery alone. Stand by for confirmation. Continue search for enemy indirect fire assets and convoy status." It was the same logic in a new voice. Deny the failure until paperwork caught up. She dragged the pod off the ruin of the strip and back along Route Green, jaw clenched. Her eyes caught on a bright, straight line crossing the landscape a few kilometers away. A highway junction, its surface sun-bleached and mostly intact. Traffic long gone. Cars abandoned on the shoulders. The shape matched the satellite slide from the briefing almost exactly. Ghost's voice cut through her thoughts. "Ember, you see Hammer?" She forced her attention back to the immediate task. A cluster of vehicles emerged from the haze, halted along the road, small figures moving around them. "I have a group of heat signatures on Route Green, short of Bravo," she said. "Likely Hammer. No enemy launch points observed yet." As she zoomed in, another artillery flash lit the horizon to the north, closer this time. The thunder reached her through the thin skin of the cockpit a moment later. The plan on the ground still assumed a forward strip that no longer existed. Above it all, Elena circled in an ugly, patient orbit, caught between what her instruments showed and what command was willing to admit, and aware now that the only usable stretch of pavement in the area was not the one on any official slide. The first mortar round walked in short, a pale bloom in Elena's targeting pod that blossomed into smoke around the halted vehicles. "Splash, 50 short of Hammer," she reported, heart rate ticking up. "Adjusting." The second round landed closer. In the pod's grayscale world, men threw themselves to the ground, silhouettes jerking behind trucks. A third burst threw fragments across the road. Viking Ember, she called, forcing her voice steady. I see impacts near your position. I do not have origin. Say again, do you have eyes on launch point? Static hissed long enough to make her check the radio panel. Then Viking came back, breath tight. Negative solid visual. Suspected tubes firing from north edge of village, grid Tango 15. They are under cover. I moved too far. I am exposed. I need your eyes. Elena slewed the pod toward the village. Low, flat-roofed buildings crowded together. Alleys narrow as knife cuts. Heat signatures spilled through the streets. Families out in the open, some running, some frozen. Somewhere among them, mortar tubes coughed death toward the convoy. ROE sat on her kneeboard. No fires inside the village box unless declared troops in contact and cleared. No exceptions. Ember Tower, the controller's voice cut in. Reminder, village grid is no fire unless TIC, confirm. Copy RO, she said. Her thumb hovered near the weapon select. Searching for launch point. She watched for the telltale flash, the puff of smoke at roofline or courtyard. Every shape could be someone's house. Every delay was another 30 seconds of Hammer sitting still. Another round arced in, this one landing almost on top of a fuel truck. The pod bloomed white, then gray. When the smoke thinned, the truck was half-gutted, men dragging someone away from the wreck. Ember, Hammer 6! A strained voice broke in. We cannot stay here. We move, we die, we hold, we die. Where are those tubes? Elena narrowed the pod's field of view, tracing a faint arc back along the trajectory. There, at the edge of the village, near a walled orchard, a cluster of hot spots on a rooftop. A small flash, then another. I may have origin, she said. Rooftop near north edge, possible civilians in vicinity. No PID on personnel as combatants. Ember, you do not fire without PID, Tower snapped. We will not hit that village without confirmation. She knew that voice could not see what she saw. The convoy pinned, the pattern of fire tightening. Viking Ember, can you mark? She asked. Negative smoke, Viking replied, voice raw. If I pop up, they will see me. Mortars are bracketed on me now. I am troops in contact. Say again, I am TIC, danger close. You are cleared hot on my mark. Viking, Tower cut across. ROE does not... Override, Tower, Viking snapped, something breaking in her tone. If she does not shoot, we are done here. Elena felt the old memory surge up, another JTAC, another edge, her own voice saying unable as a safer asset was called in and never arrived. Her finger settled on the master arm switch. She flicked it up. Ember, Ghost warned. This is thin ice. Copy, she said. Viking, from your position, confirm target building. North edge, flat roof, 3 adjacent trees on east side. Mortar. Flashes observed. Affirm, Viking said, breathless. In the background, Elena heard the dull thump of another impact far too close to an open mic. That is them. You have my house, Ember. Take it. There it was. The clearance no slide would ever fully sanction. She rolled the jet, lining the pipper up in her HUD with the rooftop. The GAU-8's tone murmured in her headset, patient and terrible. She thumbed the laser on, held the cross steady through the tremor in her hands. Ember in hot, she called. Single pass, guns, danger close. The world narrowed to the run-in. Smoke strands crossed her nose. The village filled her windscreen, the target building a tiny square at the center of everything. She squeezed the trigger. The gun's roar was a physical thing, a solid shove through the airframe. Tracers stitched down in a tight line, ripping through rooftop and wall, chewing the mortar position into shards. She rode the recoil, then pulled off, banking away, eyes flicking to the pod. The rooftop was gone, collapsed inward. Secondary explosions popped, ammunition cooking off. No new mortar flashes. Viking Ember, assess. There was breathing on the line. Then a hoarse. Impacts on target. Mortars are quiet. You were very close. Any civilian movement? Tower demanded. Unknown, Viking said. Right now I am trying to keep my people from bleeding out. On Hammer's net, voices overlapped. Calls for medics, roll calls. A couple of call signs answered late, some not at all. An ammo truck's commander cut through. We are nearly black, Ember. If they hit us again, we have nothing left. The mortars were silent, but the road ahead was no safer, just momentarily less lethal. Elena leveled off, heart still thudding with the gun's echo, and for the first time the idea slid in, unwanted but persistent. Even if she could kill every tube aimed at them, someone would have to put steel and bandages back into Hammer's hands. From the air, resupply was starting to look less like a crazy idea and more like the only one left. By full dark, the desert had become a void with a few scattered embers. From her orbit, the only proof of life below came from IR glows on the pod and the occasional white flash of another distant impact. Ember fuel 7.6, Elena reported, glancing at the gauges. Time on station, 20 plus if we accept a tight reserve. Ghost fuel 7.9, her lead replied. We will hit the tanker on schedule unless Hammer falls apart first. On the ground, convoy Hammer sat in a loose clump of heat near Route Green, just short of the village. Movement patterns had slowed, jittery and uneven, not the purposeful choreography of a unit on plan, the drag of people tending to wounded and counting rounds. Hammer 6 to all stations. A fatigued voice came over the net. Ammo report. Voices answered in sequence, each call sign returning numbers that sounded more like a countdown than a status. 2 mags, 1 belt, 3 rounds, nothing. Elena let the list sink in. She checked her own inventory. 2 Mavericks left, 1 bomb, a lot of 30mm. None of it could be handed to the convoy like ammunition off a shelf. TOC to Hammer 6, a new voice cut in from higher. Continue movement toward designated forward strip as planned. Air cover remains on station. Negative, Hammer 6 said, strain cracking through his courtesy. Forward strip is gone. Ember called it cratered. If we move into a bowl with no exit and no resupply. Engineers have not confirmed total loss, Talk insisted. Until we receive that confirmation, the plan stands. Proceed. Elena's jaw tightened. She keyed her mic. Talk, Ember. Sensor imagery shows multiple craters and active fires on F-Sara 2. No continuous runway length. You will not be landing aircraft there or refueling. Noted, Ember, Talk replied, the words thick with polite dismissal. Until engineers certify, strip status is degraded, usable with caution. Hammer continues to objective. She stared at the dead strip's icon on her display and felt a familiar frustration burn under her ribs. Usable with caution. Words for slides, not for asphalt. Her eyes slid to another symbol. The unlabeled highway. A thin gray line crossing the landscape near the convoy. In the pod, it looked almost surreal. Straight, pale, with abandoned vehicles pushed haphazardly to the shoulders. No craters, no fires, just space. She heard herself before she fully thought it through. From current altitude, she said, more to ghost than anyone. That highway segment north of Hammer looks long. Surface appears intact. It is almost within strip length for a light hog on a hot day. Static hung for half a second. Ember, Ghost said, voice suddenly hard. You will not finish that sentence. She blinked. I am stating what I see. You are flirting with an option that does not exist, he shot back. ROE is clear. No landings on uncertified surfaces. No highway stunts. We are not a recruiting video. She felt the heat rise in her neck. I am aware of the ROE. Then act like it, he said. Hammer's problem is resupply and maneuver, not you playing test pilot on a road. Under the edge in his tone, she heard something else. Fear. Not abstract fear of losing an asset, but of losing her. It should have comforted her. Instead, it made her feel smaller, as if her judgment needed protecting. Copy, she said, flattening her voice, returning to KS search. On the ground net, Hammer 6 was still arguing with Teok. His words ground down to essentials. If we move to that strip, we die tired. If we stay, we die sitting. Unless someone finds us ammo and a way around. There was no answer. Minutes later, as the main channels quieted into tense maintenance, a more tentative voice slid into her headset on a side frequency. Ember, this is Viking, private channel. You read me? Loud and clear, Elena said, grateful for the human sound. I heard part of that highway talk, Viking said. Off record, for my own sanity. Was that you thinking out loud? Or is it truly impossible? Elena looked back at the pod feed. The road, the convoy, the dead strip smoldering in the distance. Not impossible, she said carefully. Just outside what anyone sane would call acceptable. We do not have numbers for it. Not officially. But you have numbers in your head, Viking said. I could hear it. Elena exhaled. Her right hand drifted to her kneeboard, where the edge of a pencil pressed under the elastic band. I'm starting to get them, she admitted. She flipped to a blank page and began jotting weight, runway lengths, breaking distances in the glow of her cockpit lights. The aircraft humming gently around her. With each line of scratch math, the highway shifted in her mind from a myth to an option, a terrible, narrow one, but real enough to pull her a few steps closer. The numbers on Elena's kneeboard refused to stay abstract. Every time she checked her fuel or glanced at Hammer's heat signature below, the column of figures pulled at her like gravity. Ember, maintain Angels 1-5, standard KS stack, Tower instructed. We have reports of man pads in the area. Do not drop below minimum safe altitude without tasking. Copy, she replied. Her eyes were already drifting to the highway. In the targeting pod, the pale strip carved through the dark like a scar. Cars sat abandoned on the shoulders, some with doors open, ghost shapes in infrared. The surface looked mostly smooth from this height, but mostly was not good enough. Not for what she was starting to contemplate. Viking? Status? She asked. Not good, came the answer. We have wounded we cannot move and rifles we cannot feed. If Hammer pushes, we go dry halfway there. The words tightened something in her chest. She flicked her NVGs down, the world shifting into grainy green. The highway glowed faintly, a washed-out line through darker fields. Tower, Ember, she said, testing the ground. My pod is giving me intermittent resolution on surface detail near the route. Request descent 5,000 feet for a better look at potential obstacles for Hammer's movement. A pause. Negative, Ember. Threat picture does not support lower altitudes. Use existing sensor data. Maintain 1-5. She had expected that. She stared at the HUD, at the thin line of the horizon, at the ghostly river of road on the pod screen. If she made this decision later, with no better eyes on, she would be guessing. The idea of guessing made her skin crawl. Ember, your pod video just glitched, Ghost noted. You good? She seized on it. I am seeing some dropout on the feed, she said. Possibly angle-related. I will take a shallow descent to see if it clears. Stay within altitude block, Tower said sharply. Affirm, she answered, nudging the nose down just enough to feel the altimeter start to unwind. She did not dive. She bled altitude in small sips, trimming the jet, letting the shift ride under the normal drift of the stack. 500 feet, then another 5. The highway swelled in the display, surface detail sharpening. Cracks appeared, patches of broken asphalt, a scattering of debris. Ember, you are low in the block, Ghost warned. Climb a hair. Working the pod issue, she said. Stand by. She eased lower still, just long enough to see what she had to see. At the far end of the straight segment, a dark shape intruded into the lane. A burned-out truck, angled partly across the pavement. Someone had tried to push it aside and lost the argument. She measured the distance from threshold to obstruction by eye. Not generous, not fatal. Margins she would not have chosen, but margins that existed. Her heart thumped against her harness. The worst part was the way the road no longer looked like a fantasy. It looked like a calculation with a narrow band of survivable outcomes. Pod feed stabilized, she said, pulling gently back on the stick. The altimeter climbed, slowly at first, then more decisively as she slipped back into the prescribed block. Copy, Ghost said, a little of the tension leaving his tone. Stay up here with the rest of us mortals. She did not answer. Her hands had a faint tremor when she went back to the kneeboard, adding a line. Truck at far end, debris mid-lane, usable length reduced. Below, another dull flash lit the convoy. Viking's voice came through, ragged. Ember Viking, we just took more shrapnel, 2 more down. Hammer reports they are nearly black on everything that matters. Elena looked from the bleeding cluster of heat on her pod to the pale line of the highway and felt the trap closing. Now she had proof it was bad, and proof it might still be just good enough. The radio filled with overlapping voices, a braided hum of urgency and denial. Captain Elena Markova rode her orbit, the A-10 steady, while the situation below frayed. Hammer 6, Tosi, you will continue movement toward forward strip. Engineers report en route. Expect confirmation shortly. Negative, Tosi, Hammer 6 replied. We are combat ineffective in 10 minutes. Strip is a bonfire. We need a new plan, not confirmation. Elena keyed into the airnet. AWACS Ember. Request conference with Al-Sara Tower and Iron Gate TOC, over. There was a beat of surprise, then the airborne controller answered. Ember, AWACS, stand by, building combined net. Static crackled, then differentiated into distinct voices. Ember, this is Tower. TOC here. AWACS up. They sounded calm, miles away from the dust and blood on the road. She took a breath, tasting dry oxygen and rubber in her mask. Current picture. F-Sara 2 destroyed. Visual confirmation of multiple runway craters and active fires. Hammer is nearly black on ammunition and pinned under threat of renewed indirect fire. There is an intact highway segment within reach that could serve as a temporary strip or low-altitude resupply corridor. Silence, then Toke, incredulous. Say again, Ember. You are proposing we use a public road as a FARP? I am stating a fact, she said evenly. The highway exists. It has approximate usable length of... Ember, Tower cut in. You know the regs. We do not authorize landings on uncertified surfaces. We cannot guarantee load-bearing capacity, friction, or debris. A-10 landing gears designed for rough strips, she countered. We have operated from semi-prepared fields with worse surfaces than this looks from the pod. My weight and fuel state are trending toward a window where a landing is technically possible. The cockpit seemed to shrink with each word. She heard her own voice, clinical but edging toward something sharper. Technically possible is not the standard, Talk said. We have doctrine for a reason. That doctrine assumed a surviving strip, Elena said. We do not have one. Right now, we are telling Hammer to drive toward a dead end and hope your engineers disagree with what I am seeing with my own eyes. Ember, Tower warned. Watch your tone. She almost backed off. Then Viking's voice cut in, uninvited but impossible to ignore. For what it is worth, the JTAC said, voice hoarse. From down here, the highway looks a lot more real than that strip does. The net went tight. Someone cleared their throat. A new voice entered, colder, clipped. This is Lata Cole Harris. Ember, you are suggesting a landing outside certified parameters on a surface no engineer has blessed, in a threat environment with unconfirmed manpads. Do you understand what you are asking? She swallowed. Yes, sir, I understand. I am not convinced you do, Harris said. Because the last time you faced an ugly choice like this, you chose correctly. You refused an unsafe landing to pick up a JTAC. That helo crew made a different choice. They died. You did not. That is not on you. The mention hit like a physical blow. The cockpit air seemed to thin. Sir, she said, throat tight. With respect, he overrode. I will not watch you try to rewrite that story on a highway. ROE stands. No landings on uncertified surfaces. No improvisation of strips without engineer sign-off. That is a direct order. Behind the reprimand, she heard the leverage. Her wound, pulled into the light, and used to pin her in place. For a moment she could not speak. Shame rose first, hot and thick, followed by a slower burn of anger. Not at the order itself, but at the way he had reached for that memory, like pulling a safety pin. Ember, acknowledge, Tower said. She forced the word out. Copy, ROE understood. Good, Harris said. You will provide KAS and Overwatch within established parameters. That is your job. Do not try to do everyone else's. The net broke back into smaller channels, the conference dissolving as if nothing had happened. On Hammer's frequency, the convoy commander's voice returned, worn thin. All stations, Hammer 6. We are black on ammo in 5 mics if we keep firing. Repeat, 5 mics. Elena stared at the highway and her pod, at the empty stretch of possibility no one wanted to name. Outwardly, she was compliant, hemmed in by ROE and rank. Privately, as the words "black in 5" echoed in her headset, she drew an invisible line in her mind. If the next call from Viking sounded like the last call she had once ignored, she knew she would step over it. Order or no order. The cockpit lights were turned down low, a dim constellation across Elena's instruments. Outside, the sky was a featureless black dome, broken only by the occasional flare of distant explosions. Inside, time felt like it had narrowed to the space of a kneeboard. Fuel, 6.8. She wrote it down, the numbers jittering slightly as her hand shook. Ember Ghost, say fuel. 6.8, she answered. Good for a conservative 15 on station, 10 if we eat into divert. Copy. I am 7-3, Ghost said. We will push to tanker in 20 unless Hammer goes under first. On the ground net, Hammer's reports had shifted from status to survival. Casualty counts, ambulance calls. The word black kept appearing in sentences that used to include numbers. Elena flipped to a fresh page on her kneeboard and drew a line across the top. HWY landing profile. She listed the variables she could not change. Density altitude at approximate field level. Estimated headwind component. Visible debris and truck obstruction at the far end. Then she added the ones she might influence. Landing weight, approach speed, flap setting. Her pencil scratched as the jet hummed around her. Ember, tower, the controller's voice cut in. Reminder, all aircraft must retain divert fuel for designated alternate. No exceptions. She acknowledged without lifting her eyes. She was not planning to divert anywhere but down. A rough calculation. Current fuel, expected burn if she stayed on station until Hammer's ammunition was gone. Weapons expended. She crossed out the full load weight on the standard chart and subbed in a lighter figure. Weapon stations mostly empty. She compared that to the runway lengths in the manual, picking the row for semi-prepared surface, hot conditions. The highway did not fit any neat line, but it lived somewhere between two columns, somewhere unfriendly. Her margin, as she penciled it out, was less a safety buffer and more a dare. "Ember, what are you doing?" Ghost asked, catching the silence. "You are too quiet." "Math," she said. "Do not like that word right now," he muttered. She forced herself to expand the calculation. Anti-skid functioning, best case braking. Then a second, uglier line. Partial brake effectiveness. A correction for dust and debris. That number ended in a runway requirement longer than she had. She stared at it, jaw tight. Then she drew a bracket, carving away every pound she could plausibly shed before a landing attempt. Expend remaining missiles. Dump external fuel if necessary. Revised weight. Revised roll distance. The number shrank, grudgingly, into a space that fit just barely inside the length she had eyeballed between threshold and burned-out truck. "Ghost," she said quietly. "What is your fuel?" 7-1 now, he replied. "Why?" "You are heavier," she said. "Fuller tanks. More ordnance." "Correct, and that is how I like it." "Which means," she went on, "that of the two of us, I am the only one with a realistic landing envelope on that highway." There was a pause. "We are not having this conversation," he said. But they already were. She could feel the distinction settling over her. Not just any A-10, not just any pilot. This airframe, at this fuel state, with this loadout. This person. Her hand slowed. She wrote a single word under the last line of numbers, pressing the pencil hard enough to leave an impression through the page. Marginal. The engine's low rumble filled the silence. The altimeter drum ticked as the jet rode a slight thermal. Her suit felt too tight across her chest. On the JTAC net, Viking's voice came through, ragged and stripped of ceremony. "Ember Viking, we are out of ammunition. Say again, we are black on ammo. Taking direct hits. I am running out of places to put my wounded." Something inside Elena clicked from maybe to must. The numbers on her kneeboard were still cruel, but now they were no longer theory. They were the floor under whatever decision she made next. The radios had begun to sound like a crowded room where no one was listening. Captain Elena Markova sat in the center of it, alone in her cockpit. The hum of the engines a low, insistent backdrop to voices fraying at the edges. "Hammer 6, TOS. Hold position until further guidance. Engineers are—" "Further guidance will not stop the bleeding," Hammer 6 snapped. "We are combat ineffective now." Elena keyed her mic to the airnet. "AWACS, Ember. Request we consolidate on a single frequency with Hammer and Viking for a moment. I need everyone hearing the same picture." There was a pause. Then AWACS, wary. "Stand by. Combined net established. You have 30 seconds." New call signs flowed into her headset, stacked on top of the engine noise. This is Hammer 6. Viking up. Tower on. Ghost on. She took a breath, feeling the mask flex against her face. All stations, Ember. I'm going to say something that is not in any briefing slide. A few kilometers from Hammer, there is a stretch of highway that, based on what I see and the numbers I have, might allow an A-10 landing. It is not certified, it is not safe, but it exists. Ember, Tower started. She overrode, rare for her. ROE gives pilots the final authority on aircraft safety. I am not asking permission, I am asking perspective. If I try this and fail, you lose a jet, you lose me, and you still have the same problem. If I try and succeed, I can bring ammunition and limited med support directly to Hammer, maybe buy you time. Silence, thick and shocked. You are not doing this, Ghost said, voice low and dangerous. We do not barter pilots like ammo cans. That is exactly the point, she replied. Someone is being bartered either way. On the ground net, a distant crump sounded over an open microphone. Someone cried out, abruptly cut off. Viking came back, breathing hard. From where I am lying in the dirt, Ember, the math looks different. If you do not do something impossible soon, we will be overrun or bled out. Full stop. Tower tried to reassert control. Viking, you are not authorized to... Sir, Viking said, the honorific strained. With respect, I am authorized to tell you I am running out of living people to follow your plan. Elena's hand rested lightly on the stick. Her eyes flicked from the pod's image of the convoy to the pale line of the road. Hammer 6, she said. You heard what I am considering. If I go in, there may be no second attempt. No rescue if I get stuck or hit. You will lose my cover overhead. You need to understand that before I roll wings level toward that highway. She expected deflection, some half answer to preserve dignity. Instead, Hammer 6 answered without pause. Ember, if you are asking me whether I would risk your aircraft to keep 40-some people from dying in this ditch, the answer is yes. We will take that trade. The bluntness stole her breath for a heartbeat. There it was, stripped of metaphor. In the space that opened, Viking spoke again, quieter. We do not need you to be safe, Ember. We need you to be here. The words slid into the scar of the old memory like a key. Another JTAC, another call, another edge she had stepped back from. This time, the echo did not paralyze her. It aligned everything. Ember, Tower said sharply, sensing the shift. You are ordered to maintain station. Do not commit to any landing attempt. Acknowledge. She looked at the highway one last time as an abstraction. Then she nudged the stick, rolling her jet until the road lay straight ahead in her HUD, a faint line in the darkness. Ember, say intentions, Tower demanded. She pressed the transmit switch, feeling her heart settle into an oddly calm rhythm. Ember maneuvering to inspect potential landing site, she said. I will advise. Ghost swore softly over the net. Hammer 6, somewhere in the dust below, simply said, We see you. Elena eased the nose down, the jet beginning a shallow, deliberate turn toward the thin, unforgiving strip of pavement that had just become the only path she could live with. The highway lay ahead of her now, a pale slash in NVG green. Captain to Elena Markova trimmed the nose down a fraction, feeling the A-10 grow heavier in her hands as speed bled away. Ember Tower, you are leaving assigned block. Climb immediately to Angels 1-5. Say again, climb immediately. She watched the altitude unwind. 1413. Tower Ember, she said, voice controlled. Commencing visual inspection of potential landing surface. I remain within aircraft limits. That approach is unauthorized, Tower snapped. Abort! Climb! Ghost slid into view off her left, his Warthog a dark shape with cold navigation lights. Ember, rejoin on me, he said. We break off this fantasy and we go to the tanker. Hammer's fight is not over just because we admit we cannot land on a road. Your jet is heavy, Ghost, she replied, eyes on her HUD. Mine is not. If anyone has a shot, it is me. And if you miss, he said, we write your name on a wall and call it fate. I am not interested. Below the highway's faint lane markings started to separate. Her brain began doing the uninvited conversion. Each dashed line translated into distance, into stopping room. She dropped gear. The clunk and whine of the extension vibrated through the airframe. 3 green lights came up on the panel like an answer she did not entirely want. Ember, verify gear down, Ghost said, as if hoping she would say no. Down and locked, she confirmed. An amber tone chirped, the jet complaining about configuration versus altitude. She accepted it, adjusting throttles, narrowing her world to the glide path. Ember, Tower said, voice hard with rank. ROE prohibits intentional hazards between friendly aircraft. Ghost, maintain separation. Do not allow a conflicted pattern. Ghost drifted closer anyway, edging into a position that made any further descent feel like a promise of collision. You are not doing this, he said quietly. Pull up and we will pretend this was a low-level recce. You still have an exit. For a heartbeat, she imagined taking it. Climb, refuel, circle while Hammer went dark, one call sign at a time. Live with that silence for the rest of her life. Viking's voice cut in, faint and strained. Ember, be advised, more incoming. I am running out of places to hide. If you are coming down here, now would be the time. The altimeter ticked past 3,000. Her mental decision gate loomed at 2. The altitude where a go-around was still simple instead of desperate. Ghost, she said, eyes forward. If you stay there, one of us will hit the other. That is not why you are in my way. He did not answer for a second. Then his jet slid out of her windscreen, climbing away in a clean, unmistakable break-off. His last words were raw, stripped of rank. Do not make me watch you die, Elena. The use of her name landed harder than any order. For a moment, the cockpit felt huge and empty. 2,000 feet. Highway lights, sparse and broken, traced a crooked runway centerline. She eased the throttles back, set her descent, felt the sink rate stabilize. This was the last place she could still change her mind without violence. Ember, say intentions, Tower demanded. You are inside decision gate. Her thumb hovered over the mic switch. The engines rumbled, the nose steady, the highway rising. She felt something settle, a quietening under her ribs. All the earlier noise, doctrine, bar stories, past failures, fell away. She pressed the switch. Razor, Ember is... Static cracked. The recording cut. The highway rushed up at her, a narrow strip of possibility framed in black. Captain Elena Markova held the nose of the A-10 steady, eyes flicking between the aim point in her HUD and the ghostly paint of the lane markings in NVG green. Ember, altitude 1,000. Ghost's voice ghosted through the headset, smaller now, farther away. Last chance. She had already passed last chance 30 seconds ago. The jet was committed. She brought the throttles back just a hair, letting the sink rate increase. Gear down, flaps set, speed walking the edge between too fast to stop and too slow to fly. The crosswind tugged at her, a persistent hand on the vertical stabilizer. Come on, she murmured. not sure if she meant the aircraft, the road, or herself. At 200 feet, the imperfections in the pavement resolved. Cracks, patches, a faint crown in the middle that would pull her left or right if she let it. The burned-out truck at the far end was a black mass against the horizon, exactly where the math said it should not be. ROE reminder, Tower said, voice thin and distant. Preserve aircraft if able. It was almost funny. She crossed the threshold low, barely skimming the road sign that flashed past under her right wingtip. Power to idle. She eased the nose up just enough, feeling the lift sag underneath her. The main wheels hit first with a jarring double thump that shook the cockpit. For a fraction of a second, the tires seemed to skip, flirting with a bounce she could not afford. She pushed the nose down, committing the nose wheel to the abused asphalt. On the ground, she announced, to no one and everyone. Spoilers popped, killing what little lift remained. She squeezed the brakes, feeling the anti-skid chatter through the pedals as rubber met rough, dirty pavement. The jet answered with a howl of tires, a vibration that rattled her teeth. The nose began to drift right, the crown and crosswind conspiring against her. The edge of the highway crept toward the HUD's lower corner, a dark abyss of sand and ditches. No, she said aloud. She eased off the brakes, fed in rudder and a touch of differential thrust. The A-10 shuddered, resentful but obedient, nose grudgingly swinging back toward centerline. Every adjustment cost her runway. Speed bled slower than she wanted, the truck at the far end swelling in the windscreen. The smell reached her even through the sealed cockpit. Hot rubber, scorched dust, the faint metallic tang of heated brakes. Warning tones began to chirp as systems dipped into ranges they did not like. Tire temp, she muttered, glancing at the instruments. Stay with me. She reapplied brake pressure, more measured this time, riding the thin line between control and the lockup. The roar of the ground drowned out the distant sounds of war. There was only the road, the cockpit, the truck. 100 knots, 90, 70. The truck loomed, details emerging. A twisted cab, one wheel up on the divider, the rest frozen in a permanent skid. Someone else's failed calculation. Come on, she whispered. 50 knots. The nose dipped slightly as the brakes fought inertia. The A-10's bulk tried to keep going, heavy and stubborn. She added a final, firm squeeze on the pedals. The jet lurched, then settled into a bone-deep shudder. The truck filled the windscreen, close enough that she could see the jagged edge of broken glass in the windshield frame. The A-10 rolled its last few meters and stopped with a long, protesting squeal. Silence punched in behind it, so sudden it rang in her ears. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. The burned-out truck squatted just ahead, close enough that if she craned forward, she could almost imagine reaching out and touching it. Elena exhaled slowly, realizing only then that she had been holding her breath. Warning lights bloomed across her panel in angry amber and red, overheated brakes, tire stress, systems complaining about what she had just asked of them. The engines idled low and rough, like a large animal trying to decide whether it had been wounded. Ember, status? Ghost's voice came through, tight. She looked down the length of the highway visible in her mirrors. No obvious fires, no immediate departure from the pavement. She was on the road, intact, alive. Ember is on the surface, she said. Aircraft stopped, brakes hot, multiple cautions. I am on the highway. On Hammer's net, a stunned silence gave way to a ragged cheer that she could hear even over the radio distortion. Viking came on, voice half laugh, half sob. Copy visual. Ember, welcome to the neighborhood. Elena stared at the warning lights and the hulking shape of the truck ahead. She had done the thing everyone said could not be done, or should not be done. Now the jet sat there, an armored beast with clipped wings, and the question pressed in around her. She had landed the myth. How was she going to turn it into something that actually saved anyone? For the first time that night, Captain Elena Markova heard the war without a headset. When she cracked the canopy, heat and noise flooded in. Distant booms, nearer cracks of small arms, the low moan of wind over open terrain. Dust rolled across the highway in gritty waves. The smell of burned rubber and old fire from the truck ahead mixed with the sharper tang of cordite drifting from Hammer's position. She dropped the A-10's ladder and climbed down, boots hitting the uneven pavement. The jet loomed above her, squat and ugly, paint smeared with dust. Its engine stayed turning at idle, a mechanical heartbeat that could draw attention from miles away. Headlights bounced toward her from the darkness. Trucks from Hammer, moving cautiously, one at a time, under blackout conditions. Men spilled out as they stopped short of the jet. Silhouettes hunched with exhaustion. A figure jogged up, helmet askew, rifle slung. "Hammer 6, he said, chest heaving. "You Ember?" She nodded, already pulling a panel latch. "You needed ammo." "Understatement," he said. In the shadows, his face was lined and dirty, eyes shining with something between disbelief and urgency. "What have you got?" 30 mil cans, flare kits, emergency medical, she said. "Anything not bolted down, you can have." That line seemed to flip a switch. Suddenly, the quiet highway turned into a focused chaos. Soldiers formed a rough chain, hands reaching up, as Elena and a crewman from Hammer wrestled ammo cans and gear out of every accessible bay. "Careful with that," she warned as someone took a can of 30 mm from her. "It is not packaged for walking." "In 10 minutes, nothing here is packaged for anything," Hammer 6 said. "We will take our chances." Farther out, an artillery round landed with a flat smack, too close for comfort. The concussion rolled down the road, making the jet's skin quiver under her palm. "ROE says we do not loiter," Elena called over the din. "This aircraft is not a bunker. You have to be ready to move." "We will move," Hammer 6 replied. He glanced past her at the A-10, eyes flicking over the scorched tires, the warning lights glowing faintly inside the cockpit. "You going to be able to take her out of here when we are done stripping her?" She followed his gaze. The jet looked tired. Brakes cooked. One tire scuffed to the cords. Fuel low enough that the gauges made her throat tighten. "Maybe," she said. It was the most honest answer she had. Medics appeared, dragging litters. Elena dug out emergency medical packs, handing them down. A wounded soldier on a stretcher stared up at the underside of the A-10, expression loopy with pain and surprise. "Did that thing just land on the road?" he asked. "Apparently," she said. He laughed weakly. "Wish I had seen it." More rounds thumped closer, walking their way. Shrapnel pinged off the burned truck at the far end. Fragments hissed across the pavement, sparking small, bright scars. "We are done," Hammer 6 shouted. "Mount up, move." The chain dissolved into purposeful motion. Ammo cans vanished into vehicles. Med packs disappeared into hands. Engines roared to life, headlights flicking on and off as convoy discipline snapped back into place. "Ember, Hammer 6, he said, turning back once. "You bought us a chance. We will not waste it." She nodded, throat suddenly tight. "Get off this road," she said. "Stay below the ridgeline. I will cover what I can from here." The convoy rolled, first in hesitant jerks, then in a more confident flow, swinging past the A-10 and away into the dark. Dust hung in their wake like a curtain. For a moment, Elena stood alone beside her jet, watching the taillights fade. The highway felt larger now that the trucks were gone, a strip of emptiness with a single battered aircraft sitting square in the kill box. Her radio crackled in her helmet. Ghost's voice came through, thin with distance but unmistakable. "Ember, Ghost, we have you on pod. Convoy is moving. Good work." A pause. "Question is, what now? You planning to try and get that pig back into the air? Or am I calling in a recovery party?" She looked up at the A-10's scarred fuselage, at the hot brakes and stressed tires, feeling the weight of the next decision settle on her shoulders. The jet had brought her here. Now she had to decide whether she would ask it to do the impossible twice in one night. For a few seconds after the last of Hammer's trucks disappeared over the rise, the highway was as close to quiet as war ever got. Captain Elena Markova stood with one hand on the A-10's nose, feeling the faint vibration of the engines through the metal, the heat rolling off scorched brakes. "Ember, Ghost," came the call. "Convoy is clear of your position and moving under cover. You have done enough. Time to think about yourself." She looked up the road, toward the burned-out truck that had framed her stopping point, then back along the way she had come. The usable pavement between her and any notion of a takeoff was shorter than it had been, even in her earlier math. Hot rubber streaks marked her arrival like a warning not to try that again. "Copy," she said, thinking. She climbed back into the cockpit, straps biting familiar grooves into her shoulders. Inside, the warning panel glowed an unfriendly constellation. Brake temps in the red. One tire pressure indicator blinking low. Fuel hovering close enough to the bottom of the tape to make diversion a joke. She pulled out her pencil again, and almost out of habit, started another column of figures. Thrust available. Weight after offloading ammo and gear. Density altitude cooling with the night. The numbers were worse than before, but not catastrophic. The runway length she actually had, though, was now a guess with even less margin. "Ember," Tower's voice joined Ghost's, more measured now. "We have your last position. Recovery team is spinning up. Recommend you shut down, secure sensitive systems, and hold for pickup. We do not need another stunt." Officially, the ROE backed him. Aircraft could be abandoned and destroyed in place to prevent capture. Pilots, on the other hand, were not supposed to gamble twice when once had already worked. She pictured the takeoff roll, engines to full, brakes released, the jet lumbering forward over wounded asphalt. Any bounce, any veer toward the shoulder, and she would be a smear of metal and fuel. After everything that road had already taken and given, asking it for a second miracle felt like taunting physics. Her hand hovered over the throttles, then she pulled them back to idle. "Ember," she said softly, talking to the jet. "We are not doing this again." She went through the emergency checklist with a calm she did not entirely feel. Sensitive avionics powered down, data cartridges removed and dropped into a pouch. She armed the built-in destruction charges for critical components, but left the final trigger safed, a compromise between doctrine and the faint, irrational hope that someone might one day salvage the airframe. Then she keyed the radio. "Tower, Ember, shutting down. Aircraft disabled IAW capture prevention procedures. Standing by for ground exfil." "Copy," Tower said. "Recovery convoy ETA 1 hour. Stay low and stay off the skyline." The engines spun down, their whine fading into a ticking, cooling silence. The A-10 seemed to slump slightly, like a tired animal finally allowed to rest. Elena climbed down the ladder one last time and walked, a slow circle around the aircraft. In the starlight and NVG green, the scars from the landing looked almost beautiful. Black arcs of rubber, heat ripples, dust caked along the gear. "Thank you," she said, feeling faintly foolish and not caring. Then she stepped away from the jet and, per instruction, left the road, moving into the ditch and low ground. By the time the recovery vehicles reached her, her aircraft was just a dark lump on the highway behind her, anonymous again. At Al-Sara, under hard white fluorescent lights, the war shrank into bullet points. Elena sat in a small office with fabric walls, helmet on the floor by her chair. A printed incident summary lay on the desk between her and Lutcole Harris. The text was dense and bloodless. A-10C tail number. Diverted under fire. Aircraft lost due to battle damage and controlled shutdown. Ground forces successfully resupplied and extracted. No mention of a highway. No mention of unauthorized landings. The phrase "exceptional judgment under duress" appeared once, buried in a paragraph about her decision to disable the jet to prevent exploitation. Harris tapped the paper with one finger. "This is the version that goes up," he said. "Everyone agrees it is the least damaging to the squadron, to the wing, and to you." "To me?" she asked. He met her eyes. "You are grounded pending formal review. You knew that was coming. There will be questions about why you left your assigned block, why you descended, why you risked the aircraft. But there is also the matter of Hammer." He slid a second page across the desk. It was shorter. "Convoy Hammer after action," he said. "They made it. Casualties were heavy, but without your resupply, everyone agrees they would have been catastrophic." Elena scanned the lines. Hammer 6's name. Viking's call sign. A list of wounded, dead, and, unusually, saved. Multiple lives explicitly attributed to timely ammunition and emergency medical delivered by air. "Does it say how?" she asked. "No," Harris said. "It says A-10 support. That is all it needs to say." He leaned back, studying her. "There will be no medal for what you did. No official acknowledgement of the creative interpretation of ROE. At best, you get your wings back after a quiet board. At worst, you do not. Either way, that highway remains a rumor." She considered the papers, the careful omissions. "Understood, sir," she said. He hesitated, then added, "For what it is worth, I meant what I said out there. About the previous JTAC. That outcome was not your fault. This one is not fully yours either. Hammer lived because a lot of people did their jobs. Some of us just broke more rules doing them," she said. A corner of his mouth twitched. "Some of us did. You can go." She picked up her helmet and stepped out into the cool night. The bass hummed around her. Generators, distant voices, the occasional laugh that sounded too loud for the hour. Over toward the runway, she heard the familiar thunder of another A-10 taking off, wheels clattering as it left a proper strip. She walked to the edge of the apron and watched its twin landing lights rise into the dark, then blink out as it climbed and turned toward someone else's crisis. Her jet would not be joining it. Somewhere out on a forgotten stretch of road, an empty A-10 sat cooling in the desert air, already being reimagined in bar stories that would skip over math and ROE and fear. It would become a tale about a warthog that landed on a road in the middle of a firefight and walked away. The details would blur. The pilots in those stories would laugh, raise their glasses, and say, They said it could not land there, and it proved them wrong. Elena stood in the shadows, listening to the distant turbines, and let the thought drift past without trying to correct it. The convoy was out there somewhere, alive. On paper, she had lost an aircraft. In reality, she had traded metal for breathing, swearing people whose names she would probably never know. There was no applause, no speech, just the hum of the bass and the echo of Viking's voice in her memory. We do not need you to be safe. We need you to be here. She turned away from the lights and walked back into the dark, another anonymous figure on a base that would never fully write down what she had done. The myth of the A-10 would grow a new chapter without her name in it. That, she decided, was the only way it could have ended and still felt true.